Hiya team. So in this video what we're going to discuss is the role and importance of flexibility in BJJ and in grappling in general, and is it more or less important in strength, etc. So first of all, let's just look at defining flexibility and mobility. We hear these terms thrown around quite a lot. So flexibility is defined as the ability of a muscle or muscle groups to lengthen passively through a range of motion. And mobility is going to be the ability of a joint or muscle to move actively through a range of motion. I like to go a step further, and I like to define it as this for the athletes that I'm working with. Flexibility is basically your range of movement at a joint. Okay, so how far can I move within my actual joint? And then my mobility, I like to think of as my ability to express some kind of strength through this joint. So let me give you an example. Without any weight on your back whatsoever, I'm sure that you've seen people that can squat right the way down, butt to heels. That would be a great example of their flexibility. If we put a bar on their back with a certain amount of weight on it and they can only squat halfway down, they can't go all the way down, this can be due to a lack of mobility. They're not quite strong enough to do that bottom phase of the squat. So what we want to basically have is a good range of movement at all of our joints, and we also want to be able to express strength through that. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can achieve that and what's important to focus on and what's not important to focus on. The first thing that I'd like to address is the idea of stretching. Where does stretching fit into this? So there's kind of lots of different types of stretching, but I'm going to talk to you about 3 different types of stretching. There's dynamic stretching, there's static stretching, and ballistic stretching. What's important and why? One of the things that I see a lot in grappling schools is that people at the start of a class will do some very deep stretching. So they'll do things like sitting and reaching for their hamstrings, they'll stretch out their hips, pull their feet into their face, they'll do a lot of deep stretches. Now, unless there was a reason why they needed to do that, maybe because they have a pre-existing injury or something along those lines, I would say that that's not the type of stretching you want to do at the start of exercise. We want to do some type of dynamic stretch. And a dynamic stretch really refers to something where we're moving through a range of movement. So an example of a dynamic stretch for the chest might be just opening up our arms rapidly to stretch the pec muscle out and to warm the joint up. I would say that that is a type of exercise that you would want to do pre-training. It's been shown in several studies that dynamic stretching can actually enhance strength and force production, and for sure it definitely doesn't do anything detrimental to it. On the flip side, a deep static stretch, if I use the chest for example, again, if I was to stretch my arm against a door frame or against a wall and really stretch this pec out for 30 to 60 seconds, it actually can lengthen and weaken the muscle temporarily, and it can actually decrease athletic performance. So at the start of a workout, we'd only really want to be concentrating on dynamic stretching. Static stretching or ballistic stretching, which is going to be where we're kind of going sit, reach, sit, reach, sit, reach, and kind of pulsing the movement. You see this a lot in kind of striking martial arts. But either one of those types of stretching, I would say, is best reserved for post-exercise if you really wanted to do it to improve an area that you had a weakness in as far as the flexibility. So say, for example, my hamstrings are really, really tight and I wanted to improve my range of movement there. After I'm warm and I've finished exercising, then static stretching, ballistic stretching, something along those lines may have some benefits. The caveat to this though, guys, is that people kind of confuse stretching with recovery. So people say, oh, how do I recover? What's good for recovery? Stretching's good for recovery. It's actually incorrect. Stretching can be useful for recovery if you find it relaxing. So one of the most important things for recovery is being able to relax and decompress and unwind and manage our fatigue successfully. That's why the #1 thing for recovery is going to be sleep. So if we do a stretching session and we're the sort of person that finds it very relaxing, very therapeutic, we enjoy it, it can aid in your recovery, but the act of stretching itself is not particularly helping. On the flip side, if we're one of those people that are really stiff, we hate stretching, it feels really uncomfortable and it's adding more stress to the body, that will not help you recover. In fact, it will add more fatigue to your body, and it will basically have the opposite effect to what you want it to. If we were stretching purely to increase range of movement, then that could be useful. If you've got a problematic area, then it may be useful to do some static stretching. However, one of the things that I think is more important is improving our mobility. Now, if I go back to how I'm defining mobility right now, it's our ability to move through a range of movement but express some level of strength. In my opinion, one of the absolute best ways to do this is to lift weights with a good range of movement. So this would mean squatting to depth with a bar. going all the way through a hinging movement, touching the bar to the ground, or if we're doing a bench press, bringing the bar down to the chest or even beyond the chest if we're using dumbbells. In this instant, what we're doing is we are doing a very controlled movement. We're taking our joint and our muscle through its full range of movement, but we're also then going back through that movement, exerting a degree of strength. So let me give you an example on how this would link to grappling. Let's use the chest here, and we've been using that already in examples of this video. If I could bring my arms back this far, okay, so I'm pulling my elbows backwards, I've got a degree of flexibility in my chest, which is going to be very good for when somebody's on top of me and I'm framing underneath them. However, if I'm very weak here and I can't drive off, the frame is only going to be so useful. If I'm doing a bench press where I'm touching the bar to my chest and then I'm driving out from that position and I'm getting used to exerting strength through a whole range of movement, now when somebody's on top of me, not only can I get my arms into a tight frame position in a small gap, I also can likely exert some level of strength to back up my technique to aid in my escape. So I can't stress enough, guys, how important it is to have a decent degree of flexibility, but you do not need to be super flexible. If you imagine on a scale of not flexible to incredibly flexible, your needs for grappling is somewhere in the middle, okay? Same principle for strength, guys. You don't need to be a pro-level powerlifter to be good at grappling, but if you're very weak, you're gonna have a hard job. Again, somewhere in the middle is likely gonna be most kind of effective and important for you. So you don't need to go absolutely over the top with your flexibility training, but there are gonna be some things that are gonna be useful for you to do. I'm going to give you 3 drills now, guys, that you can test your flexibility with. These 3 stretching protocols, guys, will give you a good indication of your overall total flexibility. If you can do them all well, you're probably more than flexible enough for grappling. Now, caveat to all this again, guys, is if you wanted to be more flexible and spend time doing it, if it helped your game, you could definitely do it. Just understand the limitations of the stretching, which stretching is most effective for when, and if you really need to be doing it. Great work, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Our first flexibility test is to be able to sit down and hold a deep squat. We want to make sure that our butt is below our knee line and we're sitting all the way down. When we look at it from the side view, I should have a fairly upright torso position, head facing forward and bum below knees. What I want to try and avoid doing is as I sit down, leaning forward with my face facing the ground or overly rounding in the upper back. Our second flexibility drill is for our upper body, and we're going to perform this by standing close to a wall with our heels back against it and driving the arms from a low position all the way over the head. Our arms should be in contact with the wall the whole time, and we want to make sure that we're using a smooth and controlled movement. We want to avoid driving our hands up and our arms coming forward from the wall or keeping contact with our hands and our elbows lifting. We want to make sure we are touching the wall through the whole range of movement. Our final flexibility drill is to be able to bend forward and place our palms on the ground. As you can see from this video, I cannot quite touch the ground, so I'm touching my fingertips to the ground. But let's check out somebody that can do this drill more fully. So as you can see, Lee can actually hinge all the way forward and place her palms on the ground. This would be the goal of the drill, demonstrating a great degree of lower back and hamstring flexibility.